Hello everybody, welcome to Nadlan in Miami's weekly show, and today I'm here with Ido Alexander, a good friend of mine, and also a business attorney, mediator, and the owner of Align X Law. Hi Ido.
Hi, Eyal. Thank you very much for inviting me. I have been watching your show for quite some time now.
Thank you,
and
thank you.
It's really a privilege to appear here on this show. So thank you.
Nadlan in Miami, we open every door. From coconuts to skyline, you can live a little more. Tel Aviv to Ocean Drive, we'll get you there in style. Nadlan in Miami, turn your maybe to a smile.
Let's start with the real estate. So I have many investors and clients who want to buy real estate. What is the best way to put it under their name, LLC?
So you could always put it, if it's an investment property or are you going to live there? That's the first question you need to think about. If it's an investment property, you have two options, really. An entity, an LLC or a corporation, or you could always put it under something that many people here in Florida don't even know. It's called the Florida Land Trust. It's not quite a corporation or an LLC, but it's a vehicle through which you can own. And the great thing about it is nobody knows on the public records that you own it.
So the trust and the LLC, what's the main difference between them?
So the LLC is a company. You're basically opening a company that will own the real estate, but in a trust, you're transferring that ownership to a third person, a trustee. It could be you as trustee, or if it's an irrevocable trust, to another person.
Now let's talk about partners, LLC. When
Yes.
you do partner is LLC or LLP?
So LLP is a limited liability partnership, and LLC is a limited liability company. Are you doing a partnership or are you doing a company? Most people will open it as an LLC. And the thing to think about, and I'm glad that you're asking this, because this is a very common thing that I see. People are being told by their accountant, look, you own something through an LLC, somebody comes into the property, they slip on a banana, and now they sue. Who are they going to sue? Well, they're going to sue the LLC, right? But the real question is, the accountant always would say, well, the LLC will protect me. The real question is, did you really behave as though the LLC is a separate entity from you? The common mistake that many people do is they'll have a bank account for the LLC and they'll treat it as their own bank account. You'll start finding, if you look at the bank records, public shopping sprees, Prada shopping sprees, and whatnot. And that's the thing. That's the clearest evidence that there was no clear delineation between the company and the individual. And the courts will often disregard that and treat it as though it's the individual.
So the best solution for that is to open a separate bank account.
Separate bank account, behave it's a separate thing, treat it as though it's a separate.
Other than the bank account, what do you mean treat it as a separate? What else?
Look, if it's it is not don't intermix your conduct with the business. And that is the most thing.
So you mean personal expenses, you cannot use your LLC for them, right?
So here's the thing, you got to keep in mind, if you put your personal expenses and tomorrow morning somebody slips on that banana, sues the LLC, who do they want to go after? They want to go after your pockets, your other assets. Well, the biggest thing they're going to try to do is do what's called piercing the corporate veil, saying that you are the company. There's no difference between you and the company.
So by separating the bank account, you're good to go?
By separating the bank account, you're basically saying, if I need my money, I'm going to pay myself, and then I've got to pay my groceries. You're transferring the money from the company to you. You then get to pay just like you would pay any other bill from your personal bank account. But you're not using the bank account of the company to pay for your kid's school. I'm not saying that that's what he's doing.
And same thing with the income. The income to the LLC must go directly to the LLC.
Correct. Don't say, hey, the income is going to go to me, but I'm going to count it as the LLC. What we talked about is separate and apart from the tax situation. Oftentimes, the tax situation dictates that because you're a single owner of an LLC, there's no problem with you counting it and taking it as a deduction, but that's more of a tax situation. Talk to your tax advisors. Those are the perfect people to consult with, but you got to keep in mind that tax is different than the legal framework within which you're working on.
Good to know. Okay, Ido, now I want to ask you about partners disputes.
Okay.
I have many friends and clients, they go partnership, they buy together an LLC and then, things happen. What do you do next?
Well, here's the thing. They should have thought about that and come to me
Before.
right there before. When they first started talking to each other, instead of saying, hey, let's run forward, put a deposit on a lease somewhere for the company that we're opening, or commit ourselves, let's sit down and figure out what is our relationship looking like? How do we govern ourselves? And that is what's called the classic operating agreement for an LLC or a shareholder agreement in a company, distinct names, but essentially the same thing. What will govern our relationship in terms of our duties, our liabilities towards each other, in terms of our rights towards each other? Most importantly, what happens if our relationship breaks down and one of us wants to buy the others? What does the process look like? Or tomorrow morning, I no longer want to be involved in the business. I want to leave to go to Costa Rica, sit on a beach somewhere, and you decide that, why are you leaving me here? The document, the four corners of this document that we entered into will dictate what will happen. And the biggest part of that is making sure that there's a provision in there, a big provision of what is the mechanism by which we're going to buy each other out? How are we going to figure out what the price at which we're going to buy each other out? Or do we want to get into the classic fight between partners of, I think the business is worth $1.5 million, and you think, this thing is maybe worth $400,000.
So what happens in commercial leases that it's important to go to you?
So in commercial leases, oftentimes the landlord has all the leverage, but there are certain provisions depending on how big the landlord is in terms of the amount of leverage or his willingness to negotiate. You can negotiate certain terms, and you need to be aware of what terms are in your agreement. Specifically, one of those classic provisions are the guarantees, the personal guarantees that are in there. And in many instances, it's always going to be there, but can you mitigate? Can you minimize some of these or downsize some of these guarantees? One way of looking at it, there's a thing called the good guy guarantee. If a landlord doesn't want to go there, you could do a sunset guarantee where, if it's a 5-year contract with an extra 5-year option, after the first 5 years, that guarantee poofs, disappears.
So I think it's also part of the negotiation because not always the landlord will accept what you offer, right? What you suggest.
Oftentimes, I'm glad that you mentioned this. Oftentimes, the first time they come to me with, clients come to me with the contract, I'll go over it. I'll redline. It's called redlining, meaning on a Word doc, I'll do track changes and everything will come out red with suggestions. And then we'll sit down and pare it down to what I believe to be reasonably something that the landlord may be going for. What are things that you could ask? And the classic saying, you don't ask, you don't get, right? So we'll go through and we'll try to see what we can get out of the landlord. And maybe we'll go a few times back and forth, at which point I'll come back to you and say, look, landlord said 90% no, but on these things he said yes. And it's up to you to figure out what is the risk level? What is the risk profile that you want to undertake? I want to mention one thing. You may want to talk to the attorney at the time that you're contemplating the LOI, because oftentimes I see as I don't want to say a mistake, but an issue that comes up is that people negotiate the LOI, the letter of intent, that is otherwise entered into between you and the landlord that memorializes what are the terms, and they've already dictated what the terms would look like. And now they can't negotiate. It's already, they're not going to go back. There's a reason why you don't look it up on ChatGPT or Claude. You come to an attorney.
Exactly. Okay, amazing, Ido. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you guys for watching. Keep following.
Nightline in Miami, we open every door. From coconuts to skyline, you can live a little more. Tel Aviv to Ocean Drive, we'll get you there in style. Nightline in Miami, turn your maybe to a smile.
Miami, yeah.